As President of the Congress, the 25th International Grassland Congress, and on behalf of the Secretariat and the entire organizing committee, I want to officially welcome you to the 25th International Grassland Congress. I'm Ray Smith, the President of the Congress, and it's my privilege to get things started tonight. Notice that in the trade show area, we have flags from every delegate country in that exhibit hall. Over 50 countries. That's those that had registered as of 3 weeks ago. So let me know if your country happens to not be there, and we'll see if we can do something about that. We will have an opening in the morning with the national anthem and color guard. We were going to do that tonight, but it was a little bit difficult getting them out on Mother's Day. So thank you guys for being here on Mother's Day. So let me now, to give us an official welcome, introduce Dr. Nancy Cox. Nancy is the Vice President of Land Grant Engagement at the University of Kentucky and the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Food and Environment. Nancy has provided tremendous leadership in traditional agricultural programs since she was appointed as Dean in 2014, but under her deanship, the college has seen tremendous growth in support of the state's signature equine and distilled spirits industry. She supported the creation of things like the Racetrack Safety Program, Equine Analytical Chemistry Lab, and a landmark partnership with the James Bean to create the James Bean Institute of Kentucky Spirits to promote the welfare, prosperity, sustainability of Kentucky's signature spirits industry that you'll get to sample a little bit of tonight in the trade show. In coming years, Dr. Cox will shepherd the college through a nearly $66 million partnership with the United States Department of Agricultural Research Service to build a state-of-the-art forage animal production research facility on campus. Dr. Cox actively works with many community partners and organizations supporting their important collaborative efforts to support agriculture, youth, in their communities. Dean Cox, please give us a welcome.
Thanks, everyone who's here. It is my privilege and honor to welcome you all to Kentucky. As you all probably know, we have a rich history with forages and grasslands. I'm also given to understand that of the 3 times this Congress has been in the U.S., Kentucky was 2 of those 3 times, so we're proud about that. We have a lot of forage and grassland in our state. It's real important to us. In Kentucky, of the 12 million acres dedicated to production agriculture, 7 million of those are in pastures and forages. Grasslands and forages are inextricably linked to 2 of our state's signature industries. We have the largest beef herd east of the Mississippi, and furthermore, a lot of the cattle raised in the southeastern states pass through Kentucky through order buyers on their way to the feedlots. We're also known for our equine industry. About 1 million acres in the state have horses in pastures. So cattle and horses are our primary grazing animals, and they are both of huge importance to this state. We're also a state that has a lot of forests and a lot of water. So we really appreciate the natural resources of our state. The other signature industry that Ray mentioned, the distilled spirits industry, Kentucky bourbon has grown tremendously, and we do hope you'll enjoy some of that. A lot of times when people come to visit, I ask them what they think the most important crop is in Kentucky, and they say tobacco, but it hasn't been tobacco for a really long time, over 20 years really. And our state invested money in a transition from tobacco agriculture to other forms of ag. One of the things we did in our state as a result of that transition was really upgraded our beef cattle herd. And as Ray also mentioned, we have a strong research partnership with the USDA Ag Research Service. We work with them on a lot of programs, and we're going to be having a new building for them, as Ray said. We have about 650 attendees, I'm told, from, 30 countries at least, And this kind of gathering is so valuable to have academics and extension professionals together in one place. So we are very, very happy about this. And we hope as you network and learn through this event, you will certainly make the forage and grassland world better as a result of this conference. So welcome to Kentucky again, and hope you enjoy the Congress. I wanted to also point out to you the note from Senator Leader Mitch McConnell that's in your program. You may have heard about Mitch McConnell in a lot of different ways over the years, but he has always been dedicated to agriculture in Kentucky. He's done a lot for our college, and he is the reason that we're going to get the new Agricultural Research Service unit on the UK campus, and we're going to do a groundbreaking for that in a couple of weeks. So feel welcomed by our state, and we really appreciate the fact that you are here. I also get the honor of introducing Ray officially as president of the Congress. And Ray has been at UK since 2004. He has contributed really to transforming our programs that he works in with forage extension programs. He's the past chair of committees within this Congress as well, so he has contributed a lot to this Congress. Our extension folks at UK, they publish a lot in referee journals, and they do a lot of extension publications, and they help train graduate students. And Ray has been the advisor for many, many grad students. He has 64 articles in referee journals, over 150 extension publications, and Ray means a lot to our county agents, our other extension specialists, and our grazing industries. So we appreciate having Ray as part of our team, and I want to point out his lovely family has joined him tonight. Let's give an applause to the family. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to bring to the podium Dr. Ray Smith. Thanks.
We are here tonight at the 25th International Grassland Congress. As you will read in the recently compiled history of IGC, we have been meeting since 1927. This is the first time we have gathered in person in 8 years. It's good to see all of you in person. 8 years, that's the longest break since World War II. I want to thank our Kenyan colleagues, though, for keeping IGC going during the COVID pandemic by hosting our virtual Congress in 2021, joint with the International Rangeland Congress. Let's give the Kenyans a hand for all the work that they did with that Congress. I know that travel and visa restrictions and economics have made it difficult for many of you to even get here, and I commend you for making the effort. Thank you. For those colleagues that are only reading my words, we look forward to meeting you in person at the next Congress in Germany. Our theme for this week is Grasslands for Soil, Animal, and Human Health. Ecologically, grasslands are defined as areas where the vegetation is dominated by grasses and grass-like species. For most of us here, we think of grasslands as grazing lands. From the terminology of grazing lands and grazing animals, the vegetation in grasslands includes grasses, legumes, and other forbs, and at times woody species. We have native grasslands, cultivated grasslands, naturalized grasslands, and many other ecosystem types. They are all grasslands. Grasslands in all of their forms cover over 1/3 of the land surface of the world. So grasses and grasslands are important. A quote here from John Ingalls in 1872. He said, "Grass is the forgiveness of nature, her constant benediction. Forest decay, harvest perish, flowers vanish, but grass is immortal. Its tenacious fibers hold the earth in place and prevent its soluble components from washing to the sea. It yields no fruit in earth or air, and yet, should its harvest fail for a single year, famine would depopulate the world. Grasslands are important to the entire world, to forming agricultural soils, to domesticated livestock, to wildlife, to all grazing animals, to the human population, to the worldwide ecosystem. We are here today because we believe that grasslands are important. From the concluding chapter of the IGC history, grasslands have historically and justifiably been viewed as a solution to major challenges. They can contribute to a healthy, stable, and fertile soil, water catchment and quality, clean air, biodiversity of plants, animals, and other biota in both native and imposed grasslands, in addition to providing an economical feed source not directly consumable by humans. Through the animals that graze forages, food, clothing, power to transport heavy burdens, and a source of wealth are provided to humans. To many peoples of the world, grasslands provide home, heritage, livelihood, and a sense of place. The positive role of the grazing animal in maintaining the health and sustainability of the ecosystem is well documented. Long-term row crop monocultures have advantages of specialization in economies of scale, but are shown increasingly to negatively impact soil health and quality, wildlife, biodiversity, and other natural resources. Bert Christie, the IGC president in Canada in 1997, he reminded us that without grasslands, the bread baskets of today can become the dust bowls of tomorrow. Let me just take a few moments to describe why grassland scientists and practitioners from around the world have gathered for almost 100 years. It all started when Professor Friedrich Falke, a well-known German scientist, sent a letter of invitation to 50 grassland scientists in mainland Europe. The purpose of the meeting was to, in his words, exchange knowledge and practical experience in grassland agriculture in Central Europe, and the development of natural food sources for livestock and to increase their production. The subsequent gathering and tour for 16 of these scientists occurred in Leipzig, Germany in 1927, and they decided there was value in continuing to meet, and they did meet, and scientists and students and practitioners from more and more countries joined them every year, and we continue to meet today. The IGC was formed to provide a forum for the exchange of knowledge, ideas, and experience among those working with grasslands and their uses. As described by P.V. Carden, the president of the Congress in 1952 that was held in the U.S., it is an opportunity for free and open discussion of commonly recognized but unsolved problems. A forum where findings, ideas, and experiences can be exchanged, and where a mingling of minds can generate more potent activity. From the beginning, the Congress has been about information sharing and networking. Within the Congress setting, younger scientists have the opportunity to meet and learn from scientists who are already well known for their accomplishments. New ideas and perspectives have been generated. Participants have been able to establish lifelong networks with peers and gain valuable experience presenting their work on a global stage. Ray Brougham, the president of the 17th Congress in New Zealand and Australia in 1993, he said, "We are here to review the grassland regions and resources of the world and to review progress made in their development and improvement, their management and productivity, their utilization, their degradation where this is occurring, and their sustainability. We are also here to ensure that mechanisms of technology transfer, and in particular, information on wise use and practices associated with productivity increases, are transferred to practitioners, the farmers, the pastoralists, the managers, the policymakers, and the governments that are responsible for the world's grassland resources." Vivian Allen stated in the IGC history that while grassland research and content at the International Grassland Congress has traditionally been concerned with the use of grassland for livestock production, A more and more multifunctional approach has been taken to grassland as we have moved into the 21st century. This is reflected in an increased percentage of papers devoted to the environment, socioeconomics and policy, land use systems, and information and technology transfer. The Congress has been responsible for some significant progress in grassland research. Let me just give one example. It relates to efforts to overcome tall fescue toxicity from the widely planted endophyte-infected Kentucky 31 variety. Many of you will hear more about some of those issues on some of our tours on Wednesday. A New Zealand researcher, Dr. Gary Latch, met University of Georgia researcher Dr. Joe Boughton at the 1989 Congress in Nice, France. Dr. Boughton learned about Latch's safe endophytes, and they developed a collaboration to insert these new endophytes into Boughton's southeastern U.S. adapted tall fescue varieties. This collaboration led to the entire novel endophyte tall fescue industry, which has provided safe and persistent tall fescue varieties for livestock producers across the U.S. and around the world. I could relate numerous similar examples of collaborations that have developed as a result of attendance at IGC congresses. We expect new collaboration and linkages amongst you who are attending, a synergy of new ideas and further development of existing ideas. Just based on the themes and titles from some of the sessions, the research presented at the 25th IGC will lead to breakthroughs in accurate methods to measure the carbon capture potential of perennial grasslands. It will show new methods of recycling nutrients in grazing systems. In this Congress, we will see the critical value of livestock for sustainable cropping. It will emphasize to us that there are many forbs that aren't weedy species at all, but valuable for forage quality and other benefits. It will show that secondary metabolites of forage plants show tremendous potential as natural nutraceuticals for livestock. It will show us how to more effectively train the next generation of grassland scientists and the tremendous opportunities of social media for grassland education. The 25th IGC will emphasize to us that many grassland issues have social components, which we have often ignored. In her keynote on Thursday, social scientist Anna Kelly will emphasize that food security is more than simply growing more food, which is what many of us are involved in. The distribution of food and supply chains are a social challenge linked to governmental trade policies and institutional operations. Gender inequalities are social challenges stemming from cultural perceptions that are often reinforced or reflected in policy. Social, scientific, practical, these are just a few of the expected accomplishments of this Congress. The IGC Continuing Committee is putting into place several things for the future. We're developing an archive of IGC documents and materials for future generations. I want to recognize Ruth Bryan, University of Kentucky Chief Archivist, for her role. She is here tonight, and she's glad to speak to anyone interested in the process of setting up an archive during the reception. Ruth, if you would stand so people can just see you. I'm right here in the middle. Feel free to talk to Ruth during the reception. Yes, let's give Ruth a hand. As you know, our proceedings are a permanent record, a permanent legacy of research in grasslands. They will outlive us all. Now, not only are past proceedings available through libraries around the world, but we are cataloging all the proceedings papers from past congresses into an easy-to-find format that can be discovered as individual papers with any search engine. In the past 3 years since the initiation of this project, we have almost 170,000 downloads of IGC papers from 209 countries. And authors can go into the system and find the number of downloads for each of their papers that they have authored at past congresses. Currently, we have all the proceedings papers back through the 19th Congress in Brazil in 2001. We're working toward all the proceedings being on this site in coming years, even translated copies of the first two, which are in German. Go to our website under Publications to find the Proceedings repository, or simply Google IGC Proceedings. I want to recognize Kyle Bachman-Johnson with the University of Kentucky Library System and her predecessor, Adrian Ho, who started the project. And the student currently uploading the papers is Kara Montello. Kyle and Kara are both with us tonight. Thank them for their ongoing efforts during the reception. Kyle and Kara, could you guys stand up as well? Let's thank them. The IGC Continuing Committee authorized the writing of a comprehensive history of IGC, which was released in early 2021. The lead author is Dr. Vivian Allen, past IGC Continuing Committee Chair, joined by Dr. Roger Wilkins, author of the IGC Constitution. Dr. Gary Laceville and myself are also authors. There are many details from these early years of IGC that we would not know without the publication of this history and without the investigation of numerous people, including individuals like Jürgen Pickert from Germany. The history includes details from every IGC Congress and other significant events in grassland research during the last 95 years. Take time to go through it while you're here. We have a few copies available for purchase down near registration, or you can download the PDF or order a hard copy and have it shipped to you directly. We have a handout and a QR code to make that easy. The authors have just completed an annex to the history which highlights the Joint Congress in Kenya. These are printed and available for free down at registration. Please grab one of those annex copies. The Continuing Committee has also worked with the International Rangeland Congress to hold 2 joint congresses in the past 15 years. Let's support the IRC by attending their next Congress in June 2025 in Adelaide, Australia. Visit their booth in the trade show area. And I would be amiss if I didn't recognize Dr. Jim O'Rourke, the Secretariat of the International Rangeland Congress. Jim, if you would stand up. And Dr. Dana Kelly, the past president of the International Rangeland Congress. Thank you for joining us. With our proceedings, archive, and IGC history projects, we are building on the past as we prepare for the future. What is the legacy of IGC? What even is our personal legacy? I've thought about that a fair bit recently. For those of us with families, we are creating a legacy for our family. We are creating a legacy within our chosen field of study. Whether we believe it or not, whether we feel adequate or not, we are creating a legacy in students, in colleagues, in farmers and ranchers and pastoralists, in all who come across our paths. Let us here today and here this week commit to creating a positive, forward-looking, truth-seeking legacy, a legacy of personal and scientific integrity for grasslands. This is what our predecessors have done, and that is what we must strive to do. Let me conclude with a quote from the concluding chapter of the IGC history. The founders of the International Grassland Congress initiated a Congress that survived and grew because it filled a critical need. Their vision and passion for a brighter and more secure future for humankind through solutions found in the grasslands is more relevant today than it was nearly 100 years ago. The International Grassland Congress remains vital to these issues and to the nurturing of the new generations of grasslanders who will address these critical challenges and opportunities into the future. Again, on behalf of the IGC Organizing Committee, I welcome you to the 25th International Grassland Congress. It's my privilege now to introduce Dr. Peter Ballerstad. Peter got his bachelor and master's degree at the University of Georgia. We hold that in common, Peter, and got his PhD from the University of Kentucky in 1986, specializing in forage management and utilization. Peter has extensive experience in forage agriculture. He was the forage extension specialist at Oregon State from 86 through 92. He's been with Barenbrug USA since 2011, first as their forage product manager until 2018, and currently as their forage ambassador. And as Peter talks, you'll get an understanding of why he is their forage ambassador. Peter is also the current president of the American Forage and Grassland Association. So that organization is really the chief sponsor of this meeting, providing a lot of the manpower of this meeting. So Peter will represent both being a forage ambassador and being the president of the AFGC. Peter is an advocate for ruminant animal agriculture and the essential role of animal source foods in the human diet. He strives to build bridges between producers and consumers and researchers across a wide variety of scientific disciplines. Peter has spoken at many different events in the U.S. and internationally. Many of his presentations are available on YouTube. Peter and Nancy live in Western Oregon with their 3 dogs, Connor, Noni, and Iris. Peter, we welcome you to the podium.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith, and thank you all for coming. Howdy, everybody. We're going to have to work on your enthusiasm. So yes, on behalf of the American Forage and Grassland Council and the program committee members who've worked to host this meeting, thank you very much for making the effort to attend. I want to use grasslands in 2 ways. I want to talk about the biome and its role in the world of 2050, as well as this organization and its role in the world of 2050. And so our theme is grassland for soil, animal, and human health. This isn't a new concept. This goes back to the very beginning. Professor Falta made this comment about feeding a population of a country is by itself, a country by itself is the basis of public wealth, productivity, and general well-being. Sort of sounds like maybe even national security is involved here. Well, there's some interesting times that we live in. 3/4 of U.S. residents who are between the age of 17 and 24 are not eligible for service because of weight, because of drug use, because of legal issues. The biggest one of those is the weight. Overweight and obesity has become a national security issue in the United States. So that's a challenge between now and 2050. You know, it occurs to me as I look at 27 years from now. You have to keep updating that slide, right? Because as the years go by, it keeps getting closer. Well, I'm not going to be around based on actuarial tables, but today's young students or young professionals, it will still be within their professional lifetimes. Serving grassland agriculture, well, I will use that term to encompass all those that Dr. Smith listed. So what is this world going to look like? Well, various people have made pronouncements about the world population will reach more than 9 billion people. That we'll need to double world food production. Okay, some of that may come from eliminating food waste, significant issue, but we're going to have to produce more food. And it's going to have to be higher quality food. So they're projecting an increase of 66%, 2/3 increase in the demand for animal protein. I'm here to tell you that that's an underestimate, but we can talk throughout the week if you're interested. Most of that must come from the same land area that we have now. We're not making more cropland, or very minor, and there's some issues that we'll get into later. 70% of humanity will live in urban areas by 2050. So this is a global issue now. What we've seen in the United States over the last 100 years, we will see globally over the next 27. And we're going to become an increasingly aging population. As Europe becomes the oldest population in the world. What is that going to mean? Most of humanity, including 66% of global children, will live in the tropical region of the world. That's only about a third of the land mass. What's that going to mean? Future of humankind depends deeply on understanding, managing, and sustaining grasslands from the 2013 conference. I'm not interested in sustaining humanity. I'm interested in increasing flourishing of humanity. I love this quote because it starts off with, "I don't have to tell any of you," and then it continues. Well, okay, we've been talking to ourselves, but I can assure you we need to talk to the 98% of the American population that doesn't understand what you do and why that matters. So what? What's your elevator speech for answering why is this important? But we have some really good news, and part of what I hope we can do is find ways for the Grasslands Congress to start making itself better known, making the work we're doing better known, because I think it's really important. So they say I don't have to tell you. Well, there are people we need to tell. Let's imagine just for a second that the Earth's surface land area is a soccer field. Okay? Now, there's a whole lot of people in the world that don't know the difference between agricultural and arable land. Now, I don't have to tell you. Sorry. But if you were to imagine all the agricultural land, it wouldn't even make it to the center circle. That's agricultural land. The arable land would only make it to the penalty spot within that penalty area. And as my friend Dan Glenn said, yeah, the spot's getting closer and the goalie's getting nervous. We're losing arable land globally. And so whatever people are proposing about eating more of these human edible crops has to come from the arable land, not the non-arable. And then we have the problem of the either or. Of course, livestock agriculture is thoroughly integrated with agriculture, crop agriculture, for lack of a better phrase. The vast majority of the biomass produced by agriculture is not human edible. How are we going to make use of that? One study out of Europe suggested that for every kilo of vegan food, 4 to 5 kilos of inedible biomass were produced. So we have this necessary integration of livestock into our cropping systems, and of course they look different around the world. Well, the good news is there's this growing interest in soil health, and it gives us a natural in, and this results in people getting very interested in various things, some of which are well-founded or better founded than others, but it gives us an opportunity to build bridges. And of course, we can point to the essential role of cover crops, within these systems, or livestock, or rotations. These are not new concepts. And this is a key point I want to make. This quote goes back to 1908. When our soils are gone, we too must go unless we can find some way to feed on raw rock. Well, in a sense, we are, right? I mean, we're mining phosphate and we're feeding it, but not the way he meant it. So 1908, what has happened that this is not better known? Here's another one from the Yearbook of Agriculture, 1938, Mr. Kellogg, a name I usually don't try to cite, but that's another story. Essentially, all life depends upon the soil. There can be no life without soil and no soil without life. They have evolved together. 1938. Not new. Maybe poorly communicated. Grassland is a good way to farm and to live, the best way I know of to use and improve soil, the very thing on which our life and civilization rest. 1948. Not new. What's happened? How can we do better going forward? How can we let others know that what we're doing? Because I've found myself integrated into communities of disciplines outside of agriculture that are really interested in what you're doing. How can we build bridges? I think I have an answer, and I'll get to it. So grassland agriculture, as Dr. Smith mentioned, is many facets. And here are just a few that I listed: conservation, ecosystem services, cover crops and soil health, integrated livestock cropping systems, agroforestry, in addition to pasture rangeland, hay, and silage. But ultimately, it's this inedible biomass that we can run through primarily ruminants and produce highest quality food for humans, as well as other services, as well as ecosystem services. I have heard it stated that our grasslands are our most endangered biome globally. Something like 50% of our temperate grasslands and 16% of our tropical grasslands have been converted already into cropping or into urban development. Well, we got a little head start on the rest of the world. We've got almost 80% of our prairie has been converted. Arguably one of our greatest natural resources is the basis of the Corn Belt. And our subsequent stewardship has resulted in degradation of soil and some other issues. Not casting blame, I understand how we got here, but this is just the reality when we start looking around the rest of the world. The good news is that we can have healthy people and healthy soils thanks to ruminant animal agriculture. You know this. How do we tell the rest of the world this? Grassland science, which is deeply connected to food production, land utilization, and environmental conservation, is charged with the heavy responsibility of being a science for human existence. Again, I want to emphasize flourishing, because it is by fostering human flourishing, it is by maximizing human flourishing that we will get to minimizing human impact. Plus, I just think it's a moral imperative. But notice food production. Is all food equivalent? If all you're interested in is producing calories per acre, grow sugarcane. You grow a lot of calories. And of course, we're dealing with a culture that is poorly informed, let me just put it that way. And so this is a culture where it's important for us to let them know which end of this wondrous structure the enteric methane comes out of. Let alone when we go on to something like emphasizing the digestible indispensable amino acid scores of foods. Because most of these conversations are still treating protein, whether it comes from plants or animals, on an equivalent mass basis, and that is completely inappropriate. But we can't do that in sound bites. We have to find better ways to communicate. And when we start looking at some of these impacts and we use better tools, we find that the conversation changes completely. This is from the IPCC itself, the latest assessment, that they say that we ought to be estimating the global warming potential of enteric, that is from the rumen methane, by the global warming potential asterisk star, GWP star, instead of GWP 100, which is what has been used. And what they estimate is that, according to this, they've been overestimating the impact of enteric methane by about 3 to 4 times, and underestimating the impact of methane from fossil fuels by that same factor. So that might change the conversation a little bit. And here's a paper that hasn't yet reached press, but I saw the researcher report this at a meeting last week. Basically, they're estimating that the impact of enteric methane in beef cattle systems in the United States has been overestimated by approximately 12.2 times. That seems like that might be significant. But what do I know? I'm just an agronomist. What would that do to change the conversation? Have we been talking about the right thing? I'm here to suggest that we haven't. It's not that it's not important. I'm just concerned that we've been distracted. Simple fact is, sustainable food systems require livestock. Full stop. We can defend this. This need not be controversial. And here's a concept that you cannot replace food production with food processors. That when we upcycle forage fiber and cell contents through the wonder, the miracle of a ruminant animal, we are creating highest quality, nutritionally speaking, food for humans out of a resource that was not human edible. When we take grains or pulses or nuts and we process those, we're taking something that is, all right, human edible, and we're processing it into a product, and I don't know of any process that's 100% efficient. So we're not increasing the food supply at all. In fact, we're decreasing it. And many times that processing reduces the nutritive value of the highly processed product. And we haven't yet applied the appropriate qualitative tools to accurately assess, okay? And when we look at the impacts of those, there was recently a report that suggested lab-grown meat might actually be 25 times worse in its climate impact than beef. And it is nowhere close, well, depending on what we're talking about. Okay, but I digest. Let me go on. I do have to pay attention to time. Oh my goodness. Okay. So a critical idea I want people to get is that you can be overfed but undernourished. Okay? And maybe what we eat influences what we eat. Malnutrition today looks a little different than when I was a young boy. Today we have, and again, these are still pre-pandemic figures, although they were more recently released. Over 800 million are calorically undernourished. That's sort of the stereotypical, starvation. But we've got 2.6 billion that are overweight or obese. This is all malnutrition. Undernutrition is not synonymous with caloric deficit. Too many people think it is. And protein energy malnutrition is by far the most lethal form of malnutrition. Children are the most impacted. Globally, under 5 years old, over half are deficient in certain micronutrients that are essential for proper brain development, which is a lifetime decrement for them. We have nearly a quarter of children under 5 years old being stunted. This is not merely stature, it involves brain development. This has a massive impact on economic development potential. This is taking a human being and limiting their God-given potential because they're not fed properly. Nearly we have 7% that are wasted. That's a small weight to height issue, and 6% are overweight. Often we're seeing these in the same populations. U.S. adults, 60% of U.S. adults live with at least one chronic disease, 40% have two or more. This is a cost. It's 90% of the annual healthcare expenditures, which is estimated to be $4.1 trillion. What could we do with $4.1 trillion? Could we get some work done? Could we make the case that it's better to put it on the front end? Do anybody here in animal husbandry and herd health, and your herd health begins with nutrition? Like it's a bad idea to try to treat your way out of poor nutrition? Yet that's what public health is based on for humans. Globally, 73% of global deaths are due to these chronic, metabolic, therefore nutritional disorders. 60% of the global burden of disease, that's only $47 trillion by 2030. What could we do with $47 trillion? I'm not saying eliminate health care, but I'm saying building more of what, okay, never mind, sorry, got to keep going. Again, global in scope, half of the people, see, this is fundamentally the result of insulin resistance and chronically elevated insulin. This is the unifying theory of chronic disease. Half of the adults in China, India, and USA have this. So 80% live in low and middle income countries. There's this myth that this is the result of prosperity. It's key to remember that obesity is a symptom, it's not the cause, and too often it's treated as if it is. And so then we can find people like the former Director General of the World Health Organization, and the best she can do is describe obesity and diabetes as a slow motion disaster. Like, we don't know what to do about this, but we can just see the train running into the station too high a speed. Well, there are others who are suggesting, as I just mentioned, that there's a root cause. And I don't know if you can read the list of diseases, but cancer and circulatory diseases, gastrointestinal diseases, endocrine disorders, nervous disorders, skeletal disorders, urinary disorders, virtually every chronic disease that you can name has some significant linkage, if not causal relation, to hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance. I'm sorry. So let's get personal. Are you part of the 12? Or are you part of the 88? Okay, what does that mean? Only 12% of adult Americans enjoy optimal metabolic health. And that's whether they have ideal body weight or not. Because, see, weight's a bad metric. Okay, what do you mean, 88-12? Okay, so you don't have optimal cardiometabolic health if you have abdominal obesity, and there's different metrics for men and women. Biology isn't fair. You have different elevated serum triglycerides, depressed HDL cholesterol, the so-called good cholesterol, a blood pressure that's elevated, fasting blood glucose that's elevated, or you're taking medications for any one of those. If you have one of those, you don't have optimal cardiometabolic health. And I'm here to tell you that if that's true for you, please, please, please look into therapeutic carbohydrate restriction or reduction. It's well established in the literature. There are professional organizations I'm happy to introduce you to. By the way, a reduced carbohydrate diet is one that's going to not restrict animal source foods. But I can't use that slide anymore because a more recent estimate is that it's only 7% of adult Americans have optimal cardiometabolic health, and this is still pre-pandemic data. I don't think our response to the pandemic made this any better. So, borrowing from Dr. Hancock's presentation at an alfalfa conference, this slide, that where there is no vision, there is no hope. So on the one hand, we have the slow motion disaster. I'm here to offer a different vision. And just as we had Professor Borlaug and his colleagues with a green revolution, and a man who is said to have saved 1 billion people from starvation when that was 1/4 of humanity, we now have 40% of 8 million people in the world that are suffering from malnutrition. We need a ruminant revolution. Okay, come up with your own title. Come up with your own program. I know I'm not that clever, I think I am, but come on, let's work on this. Because I guarantee you that there are people who are interested. We just have to build bridges. The quote, "I personally cannot live comfortably in the midst of abject hunger and poverty and human misery." There's still 1 billion people in the world that have no access to electricity. There's still like 2 billion people in the world that burn dirty biofuels, including 1 billion that burn dung. You want to talk about circular economy? What's happening to the nutrients in the dung they burn, let alone the particulate pollution and the respiratory disease that causes? But again, I digest. So I envision the central role of grassland congresses as that of assisting scientists working in specialist areas to conceptualize their work in wider interdisciplinary context. We need to stop building silos and start building lighthouses. There are people who are really interested, but they don't know you exist. So these are just some suggestions that I would offer of some multidisciplinary things. And I really, really hope that we can start some conversations that will lead into 2027 for our 100th anniversary. There are people today that are working to achieve drug-free remission of type 2 diabetes. If the average adult American with type 2 diabetes could eliminate their medication use, that would lower their carbon footprint 29% more than if they shifted from a high meat to a vegan diet. Nobody stays on a vegan diet. They're not sustainable. See, there's many definitions to sustainable. We need to use them all. So, in October, I was given the honor of moderating the environmental section of the Dublin Summit on the role of meat in society. And there's a Dublin Declaration. If you take a picture with your phone of the QR code over farthest away from me, that will get you to a document called the Dublin Declaration of Scientists. And you can read that, and if you feel like you can support that as a scientist, please sign. They are only accepting people who have credentials, and they're trying to just get the message out that there are many well-qualified people who have this opinion that meat has an essential role in society, whether that's in its production, its sale, its consumption, the ecosystem services, etc. Last time I checked, I think they've passed over 1,000 signatures now. The QR code that's closest to me is the latest edition of the Animal Frontier, and it has the papers that came out of that Congress. So what can we do? What can the Congress do? What might we catch as a vision from this? Or do you just disagree with everything I said? That's okay. We can disagree without being disagreeable. Let's figure out how to do this, because there will be no sustainable development if we don't deal with the issue of chronic illness. Your approach may be different than mine, but let's talk about it. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you again for coming. I'm here to tell you that what you're doing is the most important thing that we can be doing. We just need to let more people know what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And please have conversations with Peter. And actually, our encouragement and Peter's encouragement is to have conversations amongst all of us with some of the things that he brought up and some of the things that you'll be learning in the next days. Before we move downstairs for the reception, I want to especially recognize our diamond sponsor, the Green Acres Foundation. Please visit them in the trade show area. Ask them about some of their grassland work. I want to also recognize our other main sponsors, Corteva, DLF, University of Kentucky, Barenbrug, Progressive Forage. Thank all those sponsors as you see those in the trade show area. Please visit all of the exhibits downstairs. So what we're going to right now is just an open reception. a time to see exhibits, a time to mingle, a time to meet, a time to have a taste of Kentucky as well. I'll explain that a little bit more when we go downstairs. So move on down that way. We'll start in the morning with the formal program at 8 o'clock with that introductions and the national anthem, things like that. Thanks everyone for joining us. See you downstairs.